April 16th, 2014, 8:49 in the morning. The Yellow Sea, off the coast of South Korea. The ship's intercom crackles. Passengers, please do not move. Stay where you are. It is more dangerous to move. The students listening to that announcement are mostly 16 years old. They are from Danwon High School, near Seoul. They are on a ferry to Jeju Island for a class trip. Most of them are below deck in their cabins, on the floor they've been assigned to share. The ship is listing badly. It has been listing for several minutes. Water is entering the hull. Most of the students stay put. They trust the announcement. They do what they are told. Over the next 2 hours, the MV Sewol capsizes and sinks. 304 people die. 250 of them are students. Most of them are found later, still in the area where the announcement told them to remain. This is not a story about a freak accident at sea. It is a story about a ship that should never have been in that water in its current condition. A crew that abandoned the vessel before the passengers. A government response that told the country almost everyone had been rescued when they hadn't. And a president who could not be reached for 7 hours while students were still alive in the water. The MV Sewol had been a Japanese ferry purchased in 2012 by Chomhae-jin Marine Company, a South Korean operator. The ship was altered before entering South Korean service. Additional passenger cabins were added to the upper decks, significantly raising the vessel's center of gravity. The cargo capacity was also expanded. Both modifications were approved through a process that critics later characterized as cursory. The ship became top-heavy in a way that reduced her safety margin in any situation requiring sudden course correction. The regulatory framework that allowed this to persist was itself part of the story. South Korean maritime safety inspection had been the subject of internal government reviews in the years before the Sewol disaster, with multiple reports identifying understaffing and inadequate inspection regimes. The Korea Shipping Association, which theoretically represented industry safety interests, was dominated by shipping companies that had strong financial incentives to oppose more rigorous inspection standards. The revolving door between the Maritime Regulatory Authority and the shipping industry was documented in subsequent investigations. Many of the officials responsible for inspecting the Sewol and similar vessels had career histories that included employment with the shipping companies they were supposed to be overseeing. Routine inspections showed the ship repeatedly sailing with far more cargo than it was certified to carry, improperly secured. In the weeks before April 16th, the Sewol had consistently carried cargo loads significantly over its rated limit. The containers and vehicles in the cargo hold were not adequately lashed down because with the ship overloaded, there simply was not enough space to do it properly. This was known. It was documented in customs and shipping records. Nobody stopped the practice. The students aboard the Sewol were from the second year of Danwon High School in Ansan, a city south of Seoul. There were approximately 325 students on the trip, traveling with about 14 teachers and a number of school administrators. For most of them, it was the first significant trip they had taken outside their home city. The island of Jeju, a volcanic resort island with beaches, hiking trails, and a distinctive culture, was a traditional destination for Korean school trips. Many of the students had been looking forward to it for months. They had boarded the Sewol the previous evening. Some of them had stayed up late into the night, talking in groups, in the corridors and the cafeteria areas, the way teenagers do on school trips. When the announcement came on the morning of April 16th, telling them to stay in place, some of them were already in their cabins. Some were in the cafeteria eating breakfast. Some were on the corridor floors in sleeping bags. Most of them did what the announcement said. On the morning of April 16th, the Sewol was carrying approximately twice its certified cargo weight. The cargo had been loaded hastily the previous night by an inexperienced crew. The third officer at the helm that morning was young, with limited experience on this route. When the ship needed to make a turn through the Mango Channel, the helm was turned too sharply at too high a speed for a vessel carrying the load it was carrying with its modified center of gravity. The ship began to list, not a gentle lean, a sudden dramatic tilt to starboard. Vehicles and containers in the cargo hold broke free from their lashings and slid to the lower side, making the list immediately worse. Within 2 minutes of the initial turn, the ship was listing more than 30 degrees and continuing to tilt. The announcement went out over the intercom. Stay where you are. Here is what was happening at the same time. The crew was preparing to abandon ship. Captain Lee Jun-sok, 69 years old, was not on the bridge when the incident began. He arrived to find the situation already critical. His officers were in the process of deciding to evacuate, but the official evacuation order to passengers was never given clearly over the intercom. The announcements that went out told passengers to wait, to stay put, to remain calm. Coast Guard vessels received a distress call at 8:58, 9 minutes after the list began. A Coast Guard helicopter arrived at the scene at 9:30 and filmed the ship from above. The footage shows crew members abandoning the vessel into life rafts and rescue boats while the ship continued to sink, with hundreds of passengers still aboard. Captain Lee was among the first people rescued. He was seen in the footage wearing his underwear, having removed his uniform, stepping from the sinking ship to a Coast Guard vessel. He was later convicted of manslaughter. His first sentence was eventually increased to life imprisonment by South Korea's Supreme Court. The Coast Guard footage showing the crew's evacuation while passengers remained inside was broadcast on South Korean television within hours of the sinking. It provoked a national crisis. But that footage was being aired against the backdrop of something equally damaging: the official information the South Korean government had been releasing since mid-morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, South Korean news agencies began reporting that the Sewol had sunk, but that most passengers had been rescued. The report was based on an initial Coast Guard communication that had been misinterpreted. By 10 o'clock, multiple South Korean news channels, citing official government sources, were reporting that all or nearly all passengers were safe. Families of students in Seoul, who had been frantically calling their children's phones, were being told by television news anchors that the rescue was essentially complete. It was not complete. The ship was still sinking, with hundreds of people inside. The Coast Guard's own response in the first critical hour was also hampered by a fundamental failure of situational awareness. The first Coast Guard vessel to arrive at the Sewol's location was the Dula, which reached the ship at approximately 9:20. Crew members of the Dula observed the Sewol listing severely, with people visible on the upper decks. What the Dula's crew did not immediately do was enter the vessel to determine how many passengers might still be inside. The rescue initially focused on people who had already made it to the outer decks or into the water. The vast majority of the Sewol's passengers, particularly those who were below deck and following the instruction to stay in place, were not visible from outside. For a period of critical time, the scale of the population still inside the ship was not communicated to the Coast Guard command structure with the urgency the situation required. The Coast Guard's formal incident management structure had been designed for individual maritime emergencies, not mass casualty events on this scale. The transition to a mass casualty response protocol with the communications resource mobilization and command clarity that protocol required took time the Sewol's passengers did not have. The false reporting persisted for hours, creating an information environment in which the true scale of the disaster was obscured precisely when the public most needed accurate information to act. Parents who might have driven to the coast to be near the rescue operation were told their children were safe. The government's capacity to process the true emergency was partially paralyzed by the incorrect information it had itself generated, and President Park Geun-hye was not reachable. For 7 hours, on the morning of April 16th, 2014, while South Korea's worst peacetime maritime disaster was unfolding in real time, the country's president could not be contacted through normal channels. Her location and activities during those 7 hours were never fully explained in any official account. The gap became one of the defining controversies of her presidency and contributed to the broader corruption investigation that ultimately led to her impeachment in 2016 and conviction in 2017. 304 people died. 250 of them were high school students. The average age of the dead was around 17 years old. The political ripple effects of the Sewol disaster contributed to a broader questioning of what South Koreans call gapjil, a term for the abuse of power by those in superior positions over those with less power, and the culture of deference that makes such abuse possible. The students who died had been taught to trust the authority of the announcement system, the captain, the Coast Guard. The authority they trusted failed them at every level simultaneously. For a generation of young South Koreans watching, the lesson they drew from Sewol was about what institutional authority actually does when it matters most. The Sewol disaster triggered one of the most significant political crises in South Korean history in the decade following the Korean War. The inadequacy of the government's response, the false reports, the unreachable president, the Coast Guard's failure to mount an effective rescue became a lens through which South Koreans re-examined the relationship between their government and the people it was supposed to protect. Candlelight vigils in Seoul drew hundreds of thousands of people. The parents of the dead camped in front of government buildings, some of them for months, demanding accountability and an independent investigation. The company that owned the Sewol, Chonghae-jin Marine, was found to have operated through a complex web of shell companies and informal ownership structures, ultimately tied to a man named Yoo Byung-mun, a religious sect leader and businessman. Yoo became a fugitive when investigators sought him in the wake of the disaster. He was found dead in a field in southern France in July 2014, several weeks after the international search for him began. The circumstances of his death were formally classified as natural causes, though questions persisted. The Sewol itself was raised from the seafloor in 2017. When divers entered the submerged hull, they found evidence that some passengers had written messages on the walls in the time between the sinking beginning and the ship going fully under. The messages have not been fully disclosed publicly out of respect for the families. The phrase that South Koreans use to describe the disaster, and particularly the government's response to it, translates roughly as the country that abandoned its children. The generation that was in high school at the time of the disaster, who were the same age as the Danwon students, refers to April 16th with a specific weight that requires no explanation between them. If you want to understand the disasters, where the official announcements, the instructions, and the information the public was given were all wrong in the same direction, toward calm, toward waiting, toward trust. Subscribe. Every week, a story that was hidden in plain sight.